This shit is like crazy, crazy shit. I'm like, this doesn't even, string theory, black holes. Like, this sounds more crazy than, you sit
Santa.
there and say this than Santa. It's so much crazier than Santa.
Man, Santa is deep today.
Such a fun team on Santa.
I just love that Kristen and Matt, they're actually together and they're doing ayahuasca bong hits.
Bro, do you have any food, bro? This conversation is hungry.
Okay, so let's record the intro now.
So what did Milkless? Because I think we start with the name.
Two dads, we love our kids, but then we also need them to know that we're like pretty cool and it's not like a wimpy podcast. So, hey, hey, Milkless.
Hey, welcome. Hey,
Milkless. Call the audience, Milkless. What's up, Milkless? Max coming at you.
What if that's it? That's our first take. Today on the podcast, we are joined by Kristen Kelly and Jen Sarbach, the co-creators of The Wall Street Skinny, which through their podcast, social media, mentorship, is trying to demystify the world of high finance. If you want to learn more about that stuff, go listen to them. Because that's not what we're talking about here. Kristen and Jen are also moms, and it's December, so we're going to talk about Santa. Here we go.
All right, Matt, today we are back live via satellite. You know I like saying that. We're here with Kristen and Jen from, I know, it's pre-recorded, but I like saying it.
It's untrue.
We're here with Kristen and Jen from The Wall Street Skinny on social media, podcast. Thanks for being here.
Thank you. It's really so much fun. Jen and I talk with this all the time, how like the best part about having a podcast is just like getting to talk and especially like reconnect with old friends. So having like, knowed you guys, what was it? Almost 20 years ago. So
wasn't that long.
Yeah, it's close. It's close. I mean, we started in 2002, guys. So it's been a while.
It's ugly.
Yeah 2025. But anyway, so thank you guys so much for having us on.
Yeah, thanks for being here. I like too that we have two moms who host like a finance podcast talking to two dads who host a parenting podcast. The kids talk a big game about being woke. We live that shit, yo. We just are. We don't even have to try. It's just what we're doing.
That's like the coolest thing. I mean, it's funny because Jen and I, when we were first starting, we were talking to each other because Jen and I have been friends since we were 7. And she'd been coming to me a bunch talking about like, well, what could we do? Like, I want to do like a podcast or want to start a business. And at one point we were like, we could do something related to parenting. And we were like, no, there's too many parenting podcasts out there that are women focused. Like it's so saturated. And that's why I think what you guys have is so cool. Cause like there aren't that many podcasts where it's like men talking about being parents. And I think that that's so amazing, but there's not that many podcasts talking about, women talking about finance. And so I especially think it's just like good for people to see kind of like the representation on both sides, whether it's like men hearing other guys talk about being dads, and then again, women hearing women talking about working in finance. Like I think it's just like really good to have the representation, on both sides.
Yeah.
All right. So the impetus for today's episode came from, from Kristen and Jen, and Jen had some pretty interesting experience. We're going to chat about it. But basically, tell us a little bit about how old your kids are. And for the listeners, this is a disclaimer. We are about to say something absolutely heinous and disgusting about Christmas. So if you have children listening right now, we're talking the worst thing you can say is coming very shortly.
This is a
massive trigger warning.
Adult ears only.
Adult ears only.
When it comes
and even
to
trigger
parenting.
So Jen.
So you were fairly warned. All right. So by the way, my name's Jen Sarbach. Nice to meet all of the Milkless listeners. I'm a huge fan myself. So the other day, my husband and I were going for a walk, and I have 2 sons aged 8 and 6, and we're getting ready for the holidays around here. We celebrate everything that has a present, right? So you name it. If you want to make up a holiday and there's a present involved, we're going to celebrate it, right? And we don't do all of like the things that we probably should around the holiday, like the education about like where this holiday comes from or whatever. Like there's presents, like let's put up a tree, let's put up a whatever. So we talk about Santa in the house, and Santa plays a big role in our conversations about the holiday. Santa is often used as a threat. Santa will know, Santa's listening, Santa's whatever, right? Santa is a non-player character in our little video game of life.
He sees you when you're sleeping.
Exactly.
So creepy.
Nothing creepy there. Yeah. Exactly. And so we were casually walking after we decorated the Christmas tree. And I was like, gosh, it's just so magical this time of year. How many more years of Santa do you think we have with our 8-year-old and our 6-year-old? And my husband was like, oh, our oldest knows. And I was like, what? What? Like, did he say something? Has he told you? Like, you got to break it down for me. And he's like, well, the other day we were driving in the car and he was like, oh, like, Dad, like, how does he really get around the world to deliver all those presents? Like, because we've done some like big numbers math in the house and like, knocking zeros off of things. Again, we're teaching him to be a future POS trader on Wall Street. So like, this all makes sense. And I was like, okay, but that doesn't mean anything, right? Like, he's just like, he's pondering some of the paradoxical elements of the Santa lore, but like, that doesn't mean he doesn't believe. But then I was thinking about it and I was like, well, we also watched the movie Elf for the first time. And like, there's nothing about the movie Elf that makes you think that Santa is real, right? It's lots of fake Santas everywhere. And like the confusion about Santa being real, being part of it. So I'm curious, I know we've got someone as old as 9 represented here amongst all of us. Kristen has 3 children, have her own, but the oldest is 6. So I'm curious, what's the strategy for either like handling, maintaining, like how much do we keep up this ruse? Am I supposed to pull him aside for a talk? Like what's the best solution you guys have?
I mean, I'll dive real quick, Matt, is like my whole thing is similar to what Matt did with we did an episode where Matt talked about like these fairies, that he has like a fairy house in his backyard and how he managed that, and his 7-year-old now understanding about that not being, real, is that I don't sell it hard. You sell it hard when the kids are like 2, 3, 4. It's like, it's like you are just trying to convince this child of a massive lie. As they get older, it's on them if they want to continue to believe. And I don't believe it's ever a time to like say, all right, come sit on my knee. I'm going to tell you about, it's so I believe, honestly, our 9-year-old still truly believes because he wants to. And I think there could be a sick, perverse subconscious thing that maybe he thinks that presents will stop if he stops believing.
Yeah.
I feel like if he knew that like, same quantity of presents, because he's super smart, he questions things all the time, but this is one of those things that he keeps going with. And it reminds me of myself when I was a kid. I remember when I got to about maybe his age, maybe 8, 9, I was like, Mom, those Santas in the mall are not real. I think they all work for Santa, and they consolidate everyone's opinions. And because how could Santa, he's building the toys right now. And my mom was just like, okay, yep. I think that the kids want to believe it.
In adulthood, think of how many demonstrably counterfactual things adults believe because it feels much better to believe them. I mean, like, so I think those initial questions of like, well, how the hell would he actually pull that off, going to all these houses? Like, there is an intellectual prodding there, but I had this conversation with my 7-year-old, which started as a conversation about this little fairy house that's under a tree in our backyard where she exchanged gifts with a fairy for a long time. And I would write her notes and like special script or whatever. And so then we had this conversation about, there was kind of like a heartbreaking conversation where she was just like, it's not just you, is it? And like when she asked me the question directly, I was like, I have to answer this honestly.
Yeah.
But until she directly asked me that question, when it was just that prodding of like, well, how would this work? How would this work? I don't know. I mean, he's like pretty magical, But when the direct question came, I was like, I got to answer it. But what was interesting was, I mean, God, like that was just the saddest conversation. Her little face just like was so sad. And afterwards she said, I am glad you told me the truth, but I wish I hadn't asked. Which was really sad.
But isn't that like kind of the theme of your whole childhood, right? Like I'm glad someone was honest with me, but I wish I didn't know this.
But I wish I didn't know
about the world now, right? Like that's the whole process of becoming an adult.
Yeah.
Well, two things. So it's funny. My daughter is now, my 6-year-old is obsessed with Home Alone. So we've watched it basically like every day for, I don't know, the first time she watched it probably 2 weeks ago, she was terrified. And then she now wants to watch it every single day. But in the show, what's his name? Kevin says to this like Santa, I'm old enough to know how this works. I know that you work for Santa. And I was like, okay, so he's 8. So I guess like we've got a few more years. This is great. But it was funny because you were talking about adults. And I mean, so my background, I was like raised Catholic. But Jen and I read Going Infinite, which was the book about Sam Bankman-Fried. And it was so interesting because they were describing him. And when he was a kid, he was like, wait, how do kids believe in Santa? Like, what the fuck? And then later, as he got older, he was like, wait, adults believe in God? Same thing. What the fuck? And it was interesting because sort of tying this to a conversation I had last night with my daughter. So we were 6 and she asked me, she was like, well, what happens when you die? And I was like, I had to be honest. I was like, honestly, I don't know. I was like, Jojo, my mother-in-law and Pop, my dad, again, we were raised Catholic. They believe in a heaven. Some people believe in reincarnation. Like some people believe different things. I was like, at the end of the day, really nobody knows. And like, but I do believe in something. But it was this, again, it was kind of this whole thing. And then the end, this was sort of the funny part. She goes, but Santa doesn't die, right? And I was like, yeah, no, Santa doesn't die. So it was so funny that she had got to this point where we were having this conversation about like death, which is like the most terrifying thing. And she was sort of okay with that. But it's like, but Santa doesn't die. And I was like, okay, Santa doesn't die. Like, I'm not piercing
well, because it's almost like as they get older, become the, Matt has a better vocabulary than me, and I know we all went to good schools, but like purveyor is the person who, is that correct word?
Who purveys.
So I still don't know because you're using it in a circular reference. But I'll keep going.
Yeah, get out
the
there.
The children become the purveyors of the myth, the legend, the myth.
The stewards, they have to kind of keep it alive.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So like, for example, many times I've been like, when we're watching a magic trick happening, and they're like, oh my God, is that real? I'm like, no, magic's not real. And they're like, but what about Santa? I'm like, well, that.
Yeah. So,
so they're always kind of keeping track of it, making sure that everything's cool with the lore. Mm-hmm. And even if they maybe know, it's a fun thing to...
Well, and I think we had to like formulate a plan early on, and by we I mean me, because I know I'm going to be the one staffed with this conversation, and I'm curious to see kind of how the responsibilities lie in your homes. But I am kind of like the emotional caregiver in a lot of ways in our homes, whether or not I'm up for the task. I'm not necessarily the most like warm and fuzzy person. But so I saw something on Instagram like 3 years ago, and I've been clinging to it for this moment, which is, the idea that if your children do find out that this is, whatever, you kind of let them in on the secret that it's our jobs now to be stewards of what it means to be Santa. You're now part of this ongoing myth, right? And you are creating the magic for other people. And that's why we, now you're part of it. Now you're part of Santa, right?
Yeah.
And like, I'm down with that. Like, that kind of works for me.
I like that.
I think that's good. Yeah. And it's kind of another metaphor for like, as you get older, you lose some innocence, but you also get to be a part of this thing where you're creating things for other people. I mean, the first thing after my 7-year-old found out that the fairy wasn't real is she put out the next like jewel at the fairy house for my 2-year-old. And
that's so sweet.
So it was good. But I'll tell you what's interesting. So very much let my 7-year-old in on like, okay, now for your little sister, we got to make this magical and make this real. This year, going into Christmas, I can't tell if my 7-year-old's just the most kick-ass actress making real for my 2-year-old, or I can't tell if she's just decided to forget. Because she's
about the Christmas
about Santa, because Santa was a part of the fairy conversation. Yeah,
I
as soon as the fairy came down, all of them came down. Like, because that's how it is. I was talking to a friend recently, and they were like, usually the tooth fairy's the first to go, and then there's a whole cascade that goes all the way to God.
I'd be happy. happy if the tooth fairy went, because the ninja moves that I have to do at
it's
2
brutal.
in the morning to sneak and get these teeth is absurd.
No, but
Fuck
we've had
the
a
tooth
story
fairy.
where,
Highest risk, lowest reward of all of the magical creatures in
Yes.
your kid's life. Yeah.
but also we've had Matt did an Instagram reel about it, like what the fuck do you do with the teeth? And he throws them away, and then you feel bad, you're throwing away a piece of your child. I store them in this weird location, like on up, like super high on the closet, and somehow one fell out, and one of our kids was like, "That's like my tooth. What is this doing here?" He hadn't lost a tooth in like 6 months, and I was like, "Oh, I have no idea." But again, he's like, "You know what must have happened?
Yeah.
My friend lost a tooth, so the tooth fairy must have been in the area and dropped one of my old teeth while it was around." I'm like, Jesus.
Yeah.
I love that, like, the voice you give to your child of, like, this, like, I don't know, like, New York cabbie being like, you know what it is?
Yeah,
Like,
no.
it must have been that they were
Hey,
there.
let me tell you a thing or two about what I think happened here. Like this, okay?
I do.
No,
I do think like it was important to me that my daughter didn't accidentally find out, because you do worry about like the deception element of it.
Getting
like
caught,
you sit on a
yeah.
throne of lies, to
Yes.
quote great movie Elf. Like, so I did feel like, particularly once she asked me directly, I was like, if I don't tell her the truth now and then she finds a tooth, like this is gonna like I could see that having
No,
like
you
a
just
bad
dig.
fallout.
You just dig deeper. You just dig
dig
deeper.
So
deeper.
interesting.
Yeah.
See,
Yeah, I know. So, I got caught with teeth in my possession as well, because I also do not throw out the teeth, but
Can't
am
throw out
not
the teeth.
clever enough to put them on a high shelf. So they sit in like a little decorative container on my nightstand, which now that I'm saying this on a public
sounds
podcast sounds
absurd.
incredibly
Sociopath.
creepy. I also have their clippings of hair from their first haircuts in plastic
Yeah.
baggies in that nightstand drawer. So now I really need to re-examine some of my habits for like memorializing my children's milestones. But I was just like, those are my teeth from when I was a kid. I don't know why I said that. Like, that seemed like a better thing.
Which
Like,
actually,
I wasn't.
my mom still has like the little hair.
No, but
from
Matt, didn't you
me and
keep
my
your teeth or something?
brother.
Oh yeah, I wanted to keep all my teeth. When I was a
You
kid, I
wouldn't
was
give 'em
like,
to the
keep
tooth
them for
fairy.
me. I was like, tell the tooth fairy to leave $1, but I want the fucking
Really?
tooth. Yeah. But I'm sorry, Kristen, you were going to say something about like
Oh.
finding out.
I remember when I found out as a kid, and I definitely didn't see it as like my parents did anything deceptive. But I will say, just if my daughter asked me point blank, I still think I'd probably keep up the ruse, because like she has asked the same thing with Jen, with your kids have asked of like, well, how does he make it around? You know, that seems a little bit like, how does he do that? But again, back to the whole thing with like what happens when you die. I just was so not prepared for what to say to that. Again, I was telling you, like I was raised Catholic, but we're not really practicing. And it's one of these things where because we're not practicing, I'm like, I don't know what to say about that, because it's not. So it was funny that I almost like wish there was like more clear-cut guardrails for that conversation, because I think it's actually a much scarier one. So it's funny that I'm like holding on to Santa, and yet there I'm like literally telling her, well, we don't know. I mean, it's like, that's terrifying for a kid. And I almost feel really bad that I was so honest like last night.
Well, but it's terrifying for everybody. Like the idea
true.
that we are going to die, and then like we don't know what comes after that,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
you know, many feel maybe nothing. So
Yeah.
But what, like, I don't think you can go wrong being honest with your kids about that. I've been honest with my kids about that since jump, and I think
Really?
like everything, it's easier to learn shit when you're little. Like I think the longer you go, like, I don't know, with some kind of myth, there's some kind of like then trying to come to terms with that in your 20s for the first time that like we might cease to exist. So that I've always, and strangely, it's never been that complicated with my kids. Same way you described in your conversation. They're just like, oh, and I'm like, it's so far away, you don't even fucking know. Like I've been alive like 10 times longer than you have, and I'm only half dead. So like that one's been pretty easy. There's something about the Santa thing, because we know it's a myth and it's one that we create, and then we kind of like intentionally are not honest with our children about it. That seems like, I don't know, fraught and weird, but also so great.
I feel like if a kid gets to be like 7, 8, 9, and they are asking point blank, "Come on, is he real?" Then I would tell. But if it's just kind of probing, I always just kind of play dumb. Hey, but how does he go house to house? I'm like, I don't know. What do you think? And they'll come up with something, and then it's like,
you've got upper management written all over you, Max. No, I think like one of the things is I read somewhere that the more holiday traditions you have, the more like that you build with your children while they're young, or just traditions in general, family traditions. It doesn't have to be around the holidays per se, but the more likely they are to come home for whether it be vacations or whatever it is, right? The more likely they are to come back. And I think in the absence of, we're not religious in our home. So like our traditions all have to be kind of like made up and involve effort and like Pinterest, right? Like, or we like call things a tradition. I'm like, I make you pancakes on the weekend. It's a tradition. It's like, nah, and they're kind of shitty anyways. I'm not a great cook. So like we are kind of searching for something to give them as an anchor, right? Like this is something we do as a family, right? So like decorating for the holidays, my 6-year-old, he's every holiday, right? He'll be like, oh, it's administrative assistance day. Like we need to decorate the house and have like special wreaths or whatever, because like they mean so much, because he loves those traditions, and anything that feels like a tradition or feels like it's worthy of a celebration is so dear to his heart. Because it's like a time when the family gets together, and that's what it represents, right? So the whole Santa thing, it's like, okay, that's cool, but at the end of the day, I don't think the kids are going to be too upset one way or another, however it shakes out with Santa. I think it's more about like, do we maintain the integrity of the family traditions around the holidays? And like, if anything, can we come up with new ones to include them in on, to replace that when that's gone, you know, like, and have that be their little anchor point.
This episode is brought to you by the Milkless Patreon. If you want to keep listening, it's only going to cost $79.99 per month. We're going entirely offline, so you can no longer listen unless you pay $79.99 per month. Just kidding, it's fucking free. We're actually losing money on the episodes, but we love doing it for you. All we want is for you to tell a friend. Think about that one friend who listens to podcasts. They told you about serial podcasts. They told you about... So, and it's like, tell them about one.
Yeah.
And it's Milkless.
Just return the favor. The $79.99 does get you feet pics from Max. So if you're into that.
I love the idea of when they do figure it out. I mean, look, as I said, I mean, I have a 6-year-old, a 4-year-old, and a 2-year-old. And so the 2-year-old is going to be believing for a while. So I think to get the 6-year-old in on the thing, so she feels, like I said, that you were describing, that now she is the one who is creating this magic for her sisters, I think is actually really special. I mean, that's the thing that's so magical about this whole idea of Santa, is it's like you're creating magic for like a little kid to then, I mean, look forward to this holiday. And there is something special about it. So I don't know. It's like, even if technically, sure, he's not real, it's like the magic is still real. And I think that that is special. And so bringing, and it's the magic of
giving gifts to other people, right? You're teaching your children like a big thing, because kids are selfish, right? Like most kids are going about their day not being like, what nice thing can I do for my little sister, right? But to tell your oldest, like, hey, listen, what an amazing thing to do. Not to be like, guess what, little 3-year-old, guess what I'm going to tell you and ruin your day, because kids can have that mean streak, right? When they're mad at each other about like stealing a toy. Like to teach her that there is something magic about giving to someone else, right? I think is a lesson that they don't really have too many other opportunities to learn at that age.
Yeah. It was cool when my daughter found out about the fairy. She had like this one time, the fairy left her this like key, which I can never tell her this, but I actually think it like came off of a liquor bottle, but like the liquor bottle came with like a cool, like an old school looking key. So it's like, this is gonna be a dope. And she hung it up on her wall because it was like she just loved it. And that key is still up there. And like, it didn't come down just because the fairy, she knew. And she even said, she was like, so you've kind of been the fairy this whole time. And I was like, yeah. I like what both of you guys just said, because I think, Jen, like, we underdo ritual. We underdo rites of passage. Like, those things are so important, particularly for kids, I think. And like the predictability of that. And the like, there's just this way that it gives groundedness to life. But Kristen, what you said, I think what's cool about Christmas, it is about the magic. That like, that is the night of the 24th is the magic in which like, for at least a part of your life, you believe there's this guy flying around and sneaking into your house. And as you become an adult, it gets hard to hold on to magic. And I think holding on to a sense of awe and wonder at existence is such a balm for the parts of existence that suck ass and make you feel bad. And I think that like magic for a kid is like training them. It's like a primer for holding on to that sense of awe for your whole life. And so that's why this stuff, why Christmas in particular is so important to me. It's because it's the ritual, it's the rite of passage, but it's also a time to like just get your kids flexing the muscle that like the world is a place that is full of wonder. And when you transfer it from Santa to the wonder is actually about like the love that your sibling felt for you, helping be a part of this surprise for all these years. Like some of that still holds, even if the original antecedent myth is gone.
I mean, when you talk about awe, not to get all bro-y, because I know that we're the bros here and we're the ones with the finance podcast. But like, I think I heard this on Huberman, which was like, if you experience awe via like whatever it is, going outside and stepping barefoot on the grass or like walking in nature or whatever it is, it like does something for your brain chemically. I don't even know. But when you said something about awe, that actually really resonated with me, because for me, as someone who didn't grow up religious, as someone who was like utterly, like used to wake up in the middle of the night when I was 5 and be like, oh my God, what happens after you die, right? For me, the thing that's actually like been something I've really gravitated towards has been science, and specifically like understanding of like, I listen to Neil deGrasse Tyson's podcast every night when I'm going to bed, and like
this was my tangent, Jen. We're like on the same.
I love it. We're gonna spend the rest of this time nerding out on science. It's gonna be great. You're singing our song.
But yeah, like, you know, the awe that I experience when I think about like the just utter scope of the universe and the things that we don't understand or whatever, for me, that's actually very comforting in a way, right? That experience of awe of being like, I'm so much smaller than these things. There's so much we don't understand. Why am I going to worry about it? Because like there is so much that's beyond our comprehension. Why not just enjoy that feeling of being a small, tiny piece of stardust, right? Rather than worrying about what happens to me when my stardust changes form, right? And
literally, so you sent me this Neil deGrasse Tyson reel where he was talking about, I mean, I don't even like know how to describe some of the shit he was getting into. It's like, you know, there's more than just, but it was like more than just 3 to 4 dimensions. And like, are we basically in this like crazy dimension and we're floating on a membrane? Like all this stuff makes absolutely no sense. And I literally said to Jen, I was like, I can't believe that, you know, this is even something like, this sounds more crazy than, you know, you sit there and say this than Santa. It's so much crazier than Santa. Yeah. It is so much crazier than believing in a God and like an afterlife. That makes sense. This shit is like crazy shit. I'm like, this doesn't even, you know, string theory, black holes, all that crazy stuff. And you're just like, this is so mind bending. And again, we are like this far into understanding this whole vast, again, universe. And like, there's so much we don't get. So again, when I was having this conversation with my daughter last night, this was what was going through my head, that it was like, what's after it? I was like, I don't know, but I do believe something because we understand so little. So for the people that are like, there's nothing, I'm like, I'm sorry. I can understand why you think that, but like, have you seen this string theory stuff? Because like, I don't know, like there's all this weird, crazy dimension crap, and it's wild. The sci-fi stuff is wild.
Well, and like the quantum, like the world of quantum mechanics, that all these ephemeral particles that don't exist in any one place, when they move together, make things that have matter and mass. Yeah, I mean, when you start talking about it, it sounds like you're spinning some kind of wild, bizarre origin myth.
Man, Santa is deep today.
Yeah, well, no, but I will say, I think that it's...
I just love that Kristen and Matt, they're actually together, and they're doing ayahuasca bong hits.
Bro, do you have any food, bro? This conversation is hungry, sick.
I tried to convince my husband to go on an ayahuasca retreat with me. I was like, this sounds really cool. And he was like, you wouldn't like the hotel. And I was like, yeah, that pretty much sums up like why I have never sought enlightenment. Like enlightenment seems like it might come with slight discomfort, and it's really not what I'm into.
Just to bring us back to Saint Nick, good old Saint Nick, in the interest of time here. Matt, something you've said in the past on previous episode was, I said last year around Christmas that I use the big guy to help me get stuff done. Santa's watching. Quick little story, and then I'd love to put it out to the group here. So we also celebrate Sinterklaas, which is the Dutch version because we lived in the Netherlands for 3 years. And he lives in Spain, and he comes on December 5th. And there's this app that you can type in stuff like, what are your kids interested in? How old are they? And what have they been good or bad for? And then the phone calls, and then he says, oh, like, in Dutch, like, can I talk with this kid? Oh, I hear that you are really good at Legos and you've been really nice to your sibling. And then something that they're going to do better. I'm like, and I know that you're going to stay in your bed all night and not go and see daddy. And our 4-year-old, who has been coming in every night for the last 60 days, that one night she didn't, and then she hasn't since. So I know it's like you got 1 month to use this thing where you can be like, Santa's watching.
It's the elf on the shelf quandary.
I just ordered the elf on the shelf mostly because my daughter was like, how come we don't have an elf? She's like, Jack has an elf. Emma has an elf. When's the elf going to show up for us? And I've not wanted to do it. It was not part of my family growing up. I was like, this is the stupidest thing.
It didn't exist.
I could buy it.
It's something that social media invented to torture us.
It's a toy version of the surveillance state. It's fucked. I'm not a fan of the elf on the shelf.
Again, I only got it because she's like, how come we don't have one? When is he showing up for us? And I was like, I guess when Amazon can deliver him, but we'll see.
So do you guys use the big guy?
For compliance purposes?
Yeah, like...
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, because I was thinking the other day, like, because it works with our 4-year-old, like Santa's watching or Santa Claus is watching. And then sometimes, like, you ever think about, like, what that actually means? Like, when you're saying Santa's watching, you're saying, I'm watching, bitch. Like, it's me. Yeah. And so sometimes I've tried to kind of intimate that without giving away the story. I'm like, no, Santa's watching. I'm like, can he see everything? I'm like, he's watching you right now. Like,
yeah, which is true.
I'm like, but does he see everything? I'm like, everything I see, he sees. And he wants you right now to put your dish in the sink, please.
I will say this. I don't threaten my children often. I'm not a believer in gentle parenting. I'm not a gentle parent. I'm whatever the opposite is. I'm a harsh parent or whatever. But what that means is like, if I threaten consequences, like there need to be consequences. And so I don't want to have to like live out those consequences of like, oh, you didn't get the present you wanted because you didn't put your dish in the sink. You know, so like I want to be consistent in some respect.
Good authoritative parenting with boundaries.
Sure, authoritarian is more like it, is more like my normal rule in my home. But yes, so I haven't done that because I don't want to have to like get into having that play out because like I do want to have consequences for when they're good and bad, and like I want to be the disher out of consequences and not have them like actually disappointed on Christmas Day.
Like you're not going to actually get them coal.
Yeah, exactly. I'm not going to be like, sorry, you couldn't get that like golf game you wanted for your Nintendo Switch because you didn't do the dishes, right? Like I just like they're getting.
Well, you know what is nice about the Santa Claus app though? I asked my 9-year-old to do something. And he was like, really? And I said, Santa Claus is watching, man. And the minute he did it, I made the phone thing call. And then when he came back downstairs after bringing it upstairs, it's like, I'm like, oh, it's calling. And he picked, and then he said that. It was like, okay, one, the magic is real. Yeah. Sint is legit. And I'm going to fucking do everything you say for the next month.
You know what's funny, Maxie? The song "He Sees You and You're Sleeping." He knows if you've been bad or good. We've drilled it into my 7-year-old so much that when she hears that, she just goes, "Not true," because we've never wanted to use Santa to like get kind of compliance. Or like, nah, that's bullshit. That's like Big Brother bullshit. So she totally rejects that side of Santa.
I will say for my middle child, like, threatening her with Santa is meaningless. She does not respond to threats. She's just sort of like, if I'm upset, I'm going to be upset. And like, if I'm not behaving, I'm not going to behave. And like, nothing you tell me is going to do anything. For my oldest daughter, this was a couple of years ago. She had seen The Grinch and was terrified by it, and that like Santa, that the Grinch would come take the presents. So I was like, the Grinch is watching, and she would shape up quick when I said the Grinch is watching.
That's really
funny.
Yeah, you need a Santa analog.
You need a villain.
There always needs to be a villain. The Krampus.
The shadow Santa. Yeah.
By the way, I loved The Grinch growing up. I used to root for the Grinch to win. I don't know why.
Oh, the Grinch is like I watched it. I was like tearing up and crying. Have you seen there's one that was like done, I think it was 2019.
Yeah,
and it's like he was
one?
like bullied, and it's so you do root for him, and then you root for him to be good.
Yeah. He turns out all right. He's got that cute dog.
Yeah.
Oh, check out the movie Klaus. That's a good Christmas movie if you haven't already.
Is it
on
actually
Netflix?
good?
Yes, it's quite good. Okay. It's a little bit. Well, it does get in. It is like an origin story for Santa. And his wife has died, and he's a toy maker that lives in the woods and is a widower, and like. But it's the story of how he becomes Santa Claus. So there are like things in it that are about like mortality, et cetera, but it's great.
Is it for adults or for kids?
Yes. Yeah, but it's for kids. Yeah, kids can watch it for sure. My daughter likes it a lot, and there's funny parts. It's silly and for kids also. Yeah. Well, I think we solved it. So, what are some of the more interesting things we had? I do think your kids will probably prod before they ask outright. I think they'll prod the logic of Santa before they ask outright.
Well, now we know we can just use quantum entanglement to explain how Santa gets around to everyone's house. So I think we've actually solved that logistical problem for another 3 years.
And the Socratic method. What do you think?
What do you think? Yeah.
Hey, what the fuck do you think, huh? They will keep the legend alive.
Yeah, I think I worried a lot before my 7-year-old found out that it was going to be fucked up when she did. And that she was going to be upset or feel like we lied to her. And it wasn't any of those things. It was sad when it happened because, like, there's a chapter marker on your life. Although she seems to have flipped back to the previous chapter for this Christmas because she's just like, do you think Santa's going to? I'm like, I don't know how to talk to you about this now. Yeah.
Is your 2-year-old around when she's asking this?
No, dude. She's like unremembered it. I kind of want to.
Probably in the DSM-5.
Oh God! Stop pathologizing my child, fucker. I don't know. It's like everything. Like people want rules for how you're supposed to do it, but if it's done like with love, usually you're fine. You know, there's not like a way for it to go. If it's done with love, you're probably doing good.
Well, I think that's exactly right. What you said. I mean, you read any parenting book, and the only theme with all of them is they all contradict each other. It's like at the end of the day, the way to handle Santa is whatever you think is going to be best. You know, it's like you know your kid, you know what's best for your family, and it's like you got to just do what's right for you guys. And honestly, like F people who try to tell you what to do. That's my 2 cents.
Yeah, the prescriptive do it this way is bullshit. Yep. All right. Hey, thanks for talking, y'all. This was fun.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for having us on, guys. This is such an honor.
You bet. Yeah. Oh man. Well, we're honored you came.
And
all right.
And we're going to go on their podcast. So if you enjoyed this one, go listen over to the Wall Street Skinny.
Yeah, we'll be talking a little bit more financy stuff like angel investing and fun things like that. So it'll be a little less light, or maybe lighter since it's not getting into death. But yeah,
I have a feeling Kristen and Matt are going to find their way back there. You'll find
to death?
Yeah. No, just awe and wonder. And I'm gonna go take another bong rip. I'll see y'all on the next podcast.
If you guys can climb out of the K-hole you guys are in, then maybe we'll.
Brought to you by Violet Archer in the case of the Purple Martin.